Assalamu alaikum Khawateen wa Hazrat. Waseem Ahsan welcomes you to lecture number 42 of Marketing for Non-Profits, MKT728 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. The component of learning during this lecture is going to be developing organizations. And when I talk about developing organization, it has to be in the context of marketing organization, meaning how a marketing department shapes up in different non-profit organizations and what are the challenges and how can we really make the marketing organization very effective so that it has a positive impact on the overall organizational goals. Only if marketing goals and objectives can achieve good results and can have a positive impact on the overall goals of the organization or the results of the organization, only then can marketing department be reckoned with. Otherwise, the people are not going to be convinced about the power of marketing. We have learned by now quite a few important marketing concepts which, if applied in the context of non-profit marketing, are bound to have a positive impact on the organizations and the results that organizations envisage in order to sustain themselves. But the fact is that this situation sounds very ideal because not every non-profit organization is applying all the marketing techniques and tools that we have learned all through the course. And we have to look into the reasons. Why is it that the people do not really seem to be convinced about the power of marketing and the interplay of marketing with other operations within the organization in order to make the whole entity very vibrant and sustainable? The marketing has been generally subservient to functions like the communications and public relations sections or departments, so to say, within the non-profit organizations, and have not had a chance to be as we look at it in the context of commercial marketing, so to say. When I talk about commercial marketing, what I mean is that we have to take a good look at all the fundamentals that we borrow from the commercial side in order to make non-profit marketing practice viable and very positive. And the fact is that we have borrowed all the concepts from the commercial side. To begin with, we know that the very basic concept of the variables of marketing mix is something which is equally applicable to the sector of nonprofits. And if we take a good look in that perspective upon anything that we may undertake as a nonprofit operation, we shall realize the importance of the marketing mix. So that happens to be the basic that we must never lose sight of. And I would say that the marketing, as it appears very effective in the present day's world, is not something which really has paved its way into the non-profit sector because of the fact that people do not seem to be convinced about the applicability of all the concepts that you and I have learned through the course. The fact is that we need to apply all good marketing concepts. And also the fact is that not many organizations are fully prepared to accept all that. So what exactly is the situation at the moment? Let me talk about that so that we can start understanding the challenges. The fact is that the marketing has permeated the area of nonprofits in two different ways. The one is through the marketing push and the other is through the marketing pull. Now this sounds very interesting, and I think the terminology makes the whole thing pretty much understandable and appreciable. Marketing push, as it goes without saying, is the thrust given by those within the organizations who think that the marketing practice is a good management tool, and therefore their organization should be considering application of all the important marketing techniques and tools. They are the people who happen to have been exposed to the concepts of marketing either through a seminar or a conference or through informal interactions with their colleagues, peers, and people from within the industry, meaning from other organizations and so on and so forth. So they start talking about the importance of the marketing in that very context, meaning the non-profit context. They also happen to be people who've had exposure to commercial marketing on the commercial side and have now switched to the non-profit sector, but unfortunately they are not strong enough to put the point across, and they are not in a position to convince their organizations to start adopting the important applications of the marketing. In other words, they are not strong enough to create that internal buy-in of the concepts that they think must be followed within the organization. So, in yet another words, we can say that these happen to be the organizations that have poor internal marketing practice. We know that the basic objective of any marketing campaign or marketing initiative is to influence behaviors, and we have to start that particular practice from within. And if people within the organization are not really convinced about a certain concept that is a contemporary concept, and they think they still are not ready to embrace that because it is unnecessary and there is no dire need to adopt that concept, then people who push it are the ones who are kind of, a failure in their wish or ambition or in their pushing the organization to start adopting marketing techniques. The other element is that of the pull marketing, which is the more interesting than push marketing. And again, I would say as the terminology suggests, it is the pull which is created within a particular non-profit organization, and it has the natural tendency to start absorbing marketing concepts because it is surrounded by such circumstances that it thinks that without adopting the latest marketing techniques, there is no way they can sustain themselves. Now, what are those circumstances? I think we have to take a look at those natural circumstances which pave the way for the latest marketing practice to be fashion of the day, or the practice of the day, to be more precise, within the organization. And like I said, it is a natural phenomenon, and it is something which is absorbed by the nonprofit, and it is because of their circumstances and the situations in which they find themselves. Very interestingly, this is a situation you and I love to talk about because all the marketing concepts are grounded in that particular situation, and that is the competitive market situation. It is because of the competitive environment that marketing exists. Otherwise, there would be no need for marketing. And if we really believe in the concept that non-profit organizations have reached a point where they find themselves at a competitive market situation, therefore, there is a dire need for them to start applying the concepts of marketing, then there is no escaping from this reality. That they have to start adopting these marketing techniques. And the pull factor is the one that makes it very natural for non-profit organizations that happen to be surrounded by that proverbial competitive market situation. As a matter of fact, that physical competitive market situation, because that makes it essential for them to start looking in those terms, otherwise they cannot survive. To give you one example, hospitals happen to be one sector within the non-profits that are following latest the marketing techniques, and for the fact that a new hospital they just cannot survive if it is not in a position to come up with competitive strategies. It will not get off the ground because it just doesn't know who to talk with, who are their target audience, and what should be the right set of communication strategies to reach their target audience. And it is not just their clients, it also could be their donors and funders who have to be approached as the part of a marketing practice, as a very well put together marketing program whereby they can approach in a in a more effective manner the donors for them to make more and more donations, on a repetitive basis. And this is the repetitive basis which on the commercial side you and I call brand loyalty. So without the marketing, the hospital just cannot survive, and it doesn't stop there. We all know that the marketing goals and objectives are translated into operations because you have to achieve compatibility between your the marketing goals and your operations. So the hospital which is in the process of generating information on its customers who are patients, it has to have a relationship between its marketing practice and its operations. That is the only way that the organization, by being marketing oriented, can pave the way for the absorption of latest marketing concepts, techniques and tools. And I would once again say that whenever we take a look at this kind of a perspective, we must not lose sight of the very fundamental of marketing mix. This may sound to you all as something very basic and something which you learned as one of the foremost concepts in the basic marketing management course, but the fact remains this is something which is going to have its applicability all across the marketing spectrum, not just the commercial marketing but also the non-profit marketing. And therefore that's something that you have to keep very close to your chest. Whenever you're dealing with a marketing situation, always think about the variables of marketing mix and try to relate, different P's with your situation. And we already have learned that it is not just 4 P's. Well, those 4 basic P's of product, price, promotion and place are extremely important. But then if you are a real marketing company that happens to be a non-profit, you may start looking at the possibility of cost marketing relationships, and that's something that we have learned over a span of quite a few lectures. And my point here is that even if you are getting into a commercial relationship with a commercial entity, the practice of the marketing is really going to help you because you are familiar with the 4 P's in the first place as product, price, promotion and place. And then in the context of cost marketing, 4 P's like the partnership, purpose, passion and profits. So whatever way you look at these fundamentals of the different sets, the 2 different sets of P's, 2 different sets of 4 P's, the more you look at this, the more you will be convinced that there is nothing positive and productive without application of the concepts of the marketing. So I would again say that the point that has been made is that it is the competitive marketing environment that creates space for a marketing department. In the very beginning of this component, I did identify the reason marketing departments have not been created so far, or the reasons why marketing departments happen to be a reality within those non-profits that are surrounded by a particular set of circumstances. It becomes very important to understand and to keep in mind that it is the competitive market environment which makes it possible, and that is something that creates that particular space that we need for the marketing department. And the marketing, of course, as it becomes more and more stronger. It has a higher level of impact on the effectiveness of the organization. So we can say that the role of the marketing is second to none. Whether a non-profit organization is subject of the push, the marketing, the syndrome, I would say, or it happens to be a case of the pull, the marketing circumstances, not the philosophy, rather the circumstances, the importance of the marketing cannot be undermined, or it cannot be overly emphasized. It is so important that we have to keep marketing as one of the foremost functions even in a non-profit setup. Given the fact that the marketing influences the behaviors, we have to keep marketing in the forefront because it influences in the very particular non-profit context behaviors of all the stakeholders, of all the target audiences. It is not just funders and donors, it happens to be the board of directors and government agencies, and the media, the personnel, and community leaders. So you as a non-profit entity have so many stakeholders to deal with, and when I start talking about the challenges, it will become clearer why it is important for the marketing department or the marketing personnel to influence the behaviors of all the stakeholders, or in other words, all the publics, as we understand the concept in this very context. You have to influence the behaviors of all the publics, and all the more reason you need to have a very well laid out the marketing set of practices. And we also know that there are so many other functions that are to be performed by the function of marketing within an organization. And like I said earlier, we have to take a very good look at any initiative that we undertake in a non-profit organization, and then look at the marketing side of it. To what extent marketing really can play a very positive role in order to have that impact that I was talking about earlier on the overall organizational results. We know that without marketing, we cannot really achieve very effective sales programs. There are nonprofits that sell the tangible products, and when it comes to selling, you need to have for the overall function of marketing in order to make selling very effective. And then if you are into social marketing, you need to launch so many different programs, and with the help of so many different examples, I have explained over the span of so many lectures that have been delivered so far, that social marketing programs could be divided into different P's, and then given a proper marketing perspective. So whether it is a tangible products sales program or a social program, these cannot be executed with the help of the marketing and marketing practices. And then you see you cannot really develop a very good base of the donors as well as the volunteers. You need to have the very good marketing relationship management, I would say, and you also have to be good at carrying out marketing research in order to connect with the community of donors and funders, because you then are in a better position to reveal the motivations behind all those the donation making. And until the time you really understand what really is it that actuates the person to start giving the money to your organization, you cannot approach those potential donors and funders very effectively. And it is not a question of accessing the new donors. It also is a question of keeping your donors glued with your cause, because as you will recall, there are so many different noble causes, and everybody seems to sound very convincing, meaning any non-profit organization that is into good marketing practice seems to sound very good when it comes to executing their cause. So there's a competition among different causes, and that makes the overall marketing environment very competitive. And that is why I'm talking about all these factors which are very important for us to appreciate in terms of their applicability into the non-profit context. So there are other things which are done by the marketing. You see, until that time, you really have good marketing projections. I would say the marketing and sales projections, you cannot translate those into your financials. So the marketing plays that role as well. And then you see it is the role of overall communications that is played by marketing. So do not forget, it is not just communication with the external audiences that the marketing department plays in terms of advertising and different kinds of promotions. By sending the message, which is generally taken as advertising by not just the marketing people, but also by the general public. They say, well, that's marketing, that's advertising. But there are so many different things that you and I are supposed to be doing. So communications, and you see, its fold would take things like the internal communication, and that is the art of internal marketing. And it also takes into its fold external communications like I explained previously, when you are in a partnership mode with a commercial entity, which is going to be the name of a game in the future. It happens to be the very new phenomenon, even in the developed countries. I would say in a market like the US. It is not an old concept. It's very new, and the time is not very far when we are going to see application of this particular concept applied here as well. And that is where your expertise is going to play its role, because the more the environment becomes competitive, the higher are the chances of your, as marketing people, creating that impact that I've been talking about. And once you have created that impact, you have created the significance of the marketing department, because you have proved that this is an effective department, and this is the one that really impacts the overall goals and objectives and results. And we in the nonprofits do not distribute profits, but the fact is we work for profits. We are not hungry for profits, but we have to have profits in order to sustain ourselves. We have to have less dependence on donors and funders. If we can generate the money from within, nothing like it. And there are the non-profit organizations that are generating something up to the tune of 70% of their total requirements. And there are non-profits within our society that are generating even more than 70%. Only when it comes to needs for the more capex, they approach their donors. But for day-to-day operations, there are quite a few non-profit organizations that have become sustainable, and they have a pretty cozy, I would say, kitty, out of which they get money and plow it back into the operation and sustain themselves as viable entities. So marketing is something which should not be relegated to the position of a small section, which basically undertakes communications from time to time. I would say over a sparse kind of span of time, and things like a small PR department where you are supposed to be cultivating the government agencies and the media people, and that's the end of it. That's something which generally by a lay person is considered to be the marketing practice. That is not. Those happen to be very, very small aspects. of the overall marketing practice. The overall marketing practice is, I would again say, those P's that I'm emphasizing again and again. The concept is very fundamental, but implications are huge, and implications are very strategic. So if we believe in strategic marketing management, we just cannot escape the reality of the variables of the marketing mix. Like I said, there are many challenges which are faced by the marketing departments or non-profit organizations, or for that matter, by marketing people who would like to be part of the marketing setup in the non-profit sector. The fact is, because of the introduction of latest marketing techniques, there is a growing realization on part of the non-profits that they need to have more and more marketing people. So in other words, more and more people from the marketing side are being attracted by the non-profit sector. But there are certain challenges which they face at the moment they land into that particular sector. The biggest challenge which the marketing people face is that of salaries. The fact is that this sector is not at par with the commercial side, because what you get as a marketing manager or as a marketing officer on the non-profit side is not at par with what you can get on the other side, i.e. the commercial side. What are the reasons? We have to understand the history in a proper perspective, though very briefly. Non-profit organizations were started in the world, basically in the developed world, and I would say more so in the US than elsewhere, by women. And the women were obsessed with one particular aspect, and that was to deliver social service to the society. And while doing so, they thought that their remuneration expectations were subordinated and should have been subordinated to the passion for which they were working. So that formed the basic culture of the non-profit organizations, and that continued for decades and decades. And the fact is that that culture continues even today. Why? Because everybody seems to think that the noble cause comes first and salaries comes later, which may not be true, which may be something which you and I can argue and should argue. But they think that social cause should take precedence over remunerations. And this concept was further strengthened by the thinking of so many different non-profit founders. And as we know, again for a fact, that the founders happen to be the people who are extremely passionate about the cause they start working on. And when they work on a cause with that kind of a passion, they make their expectations for money subservient to the passion they work for, like I said earlier. So this culture has strengthened all over the world. It doesn't end there. Your the stakeholders, especially the outside people in the form of the board of directors, and more so your donors, they seem to be convinced that non-profit organizations should not be the ones to pay hefty salaries to their staff members, because they are basically meant to give a sacrifice. That is the key word. They think and they are convinced that giving sacrifice should be the culture of a non-profit organization, and not getting money out of it, not getting huge salaries out of it. Here you see the counter argument is that if you really want to hunt for good talent, meaning the compatible talent with the requirements of the day, then you have to have good people. And good people will not be attracted unless you pay those people well. But then Again, an argument is that there are so many people who settle for less because they think that they should escape the reality of the commercial world. They should not subject themselves to the stress, which leads to, bad health. And therefore, they should work for the non-profit sector where things are rather cool. And that's something which in typical competitive marketing environment is not a good word, and it's not a good thinking. It's not, you see, a practical philosophy. Here what I'm saying is that you need to create that stress, and that stress is automatically, creeps into the system when you start fixing yourselves marketing goals and objectives. I think that goes without saying. You are operating in a competitive environment. You have certain goals and objectives to achieve, and the translation of that achievement means fulfillment of the mission. And therefore, you see, the whole thing becomes very competitive, it becomes very stressful, and there are so many people within the nonprofit the sector who settle for less, and therefore, people who think that they, have a lot of talent, they are head and shoulders above the others, and therefore, they should be paid salaries compatible with the commercial sector, end up getting disappointed, and that's where they start getting into kind of a culture conflict. And culture conflict presents itself in so many different ways, but we have to understand first that there are people who like to see the environment as much competitive in terms of management practices, meaning overall management practices, as that environment may happen or may exist on the other side, i.e. the commercial side. And there are people who may belong originally to the commercial side but have shifted to the non-profit side only because they do not want to take stress. Not only they do not want to take stress, they also do not really want to create situations and conditions for their colleagues and peers which could be defined as stressful. And that's where you see they kind of slacken on appraising the people very objectively because they overlook certain the performance lapses because they think having very stringent kind of the KPIs, meaning key performance indicators, and then you see making people living up to that amounts to creating a lot of stress unnecessarily. So these are the kind of conditions that create a culture conflict between managers, different managers who subscribe to two different schools of thought. And that is something you people have to adapt to if you happen to be part of a nonprofit. But the fact is, if a nonprofit happens to be the one with complete marketing orientation, then the chances are that you may avoid this kind of a culture conflict. Then there are other things, which make this the culture conflict very inevitable. Meaning, it has to be there. Managers who come to nonprofits from the commercial side, or even those who have been trained like you guys, they seem to think that on the commercial side there is a lot of independence of making independent decisions. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of independence to do some creative thinking and applying your the creative imagination into the marketing the practice, and that happens to be true. And I will try to explain this particular phenomenon with the help of explanation of the concept of segmentation. You know very well that a commercial marketer will have the tendency to avoid those segments which are kind of very hard nuts to crack. In other words, those segments which are very hard to influence, those segments they think they will not be very responsive, and therefore as marketing people they will not suggest to the organization that they should introduce a product for that segment. So therefore, they have the luxury of avoiding or not approaching that particular segment or a set of segments. They will rather concentrate on those segments where they have their expertise and where they think they really can influence the target audience, and then they will go full speed ahead by application of all the resources and assets they have at their disposal. And that is something which is done by the marketing people on the commercial side. This is not something which offers you that kind of luxury on the non-profit side. On the non-profit side, you just cannot escape a reality of a social ill. You want to eradicate that social ill, and you do not have the luxury of getting into that exercise of segmentation, which may allow you to not approach certain parts or certain segments of the society. You have to undertake the social program. You have to give it a complete marketing orientation, and you have to execute the program by not giving yourself that option which a commercial marketer has while he or she sells their products. So we can say that you have to attend to a market that requires your social intervention. There's no escaping it. You may like to get into segmentation once you have undertaken the social program, and then see how and where you can get into segmentation. But the market just cannot be avoided in terms of addressing the social ill, which happens to be the reason for your being, because you have a program that is designed to eradicate that social ill. So you do not really have the luxury of a commercial marketer. So this is the one conflict that presents itself on the non-profit side if you have the commercial orientation. And the fact is that we all have commercial orientation, whether we happen to be students or teachers or happen to be practitioners on the commercial side. We all have commercial orientation, and we all borrow our concepts from there and make the non-profit marketing more effective and successful. Other factor, an important factor, is that the managers on the non-profit side do not really find themselves as empowered as they do on the commercial side. They know that on the commercial side they are fully responsible for their area or areas of operations, and whatever those operations are, they are also empowered to take certain decisions, and they have the authority. And once they have the power to make decisions, they make decisions. They translate those decisions into a set of programs, and then they launch those programs and then go full speed ahead. That is not the case in a non-profit setup, because you're not as much empowered in a non-profit setup as you are on the commercial side. Why is it that you do not really have the kind of powers, or even if you have, you are reluctant to exercise those powers and be bold enough to take certain initiatives? Now, this is not to say that people on the commercial side take initiatives by not taking into confidence their superiors or important stakeholders. All I'm saying is there's a limit to it on that side. And if you take a look at the non-profit side, it is not limitless, but then it is pretty much, I would say, complicated and hazy kind of an area. I would say a gray area where the managers do not really find themselves empowered enough to go ahead with the decisions which they think they should be taking. Reason, again, having so many stakeholders. You see, on the commercial side, you have very important stakeholders as shareholders, but then the commercial managers can have powers. I would come back again to the non-profit sector. Here they do not have those kind of powers because there's a lot of intervention and, if I may say, interference from the stakeholders. Starting with the donors, funders, board of directors, and the other important community leaders who have a high level of expectations to be involved in the decision-making process. And what is the net result? Because when so many people are involved in the decision-making process, they tend not to take risk. And you see that when you do not take risk, in typical business philosophy, you do not really have very bright chances of success. You may also fail, but the fact is that if you really want to achieve great success, you have to take risks. So that is something which is kind of stifled on the nonprofit side because of the intervention by so many different stakeholders. And like I said earlier, also the fact that the people do not really want to pass on blame onto those the colleagues and peers who happen not to carry their weight only because they think they should not be very stringent about performance appraisal and creating conditions which are very stressful, and carrying out performance appraisal which is very harsh. So all these the factors pull together create kind of a culture conflict that has to be taken into a very serious consideration while we look at different kinds of challenges that the marketing people face. So where lies the answer? What is it that we should do? Well, the one is that we should keep on trying by offering our marketing expertise to the department and creating good results for the organization, so that they are convinced about the effectiveness of the marketing department. That's one option, but easier said than done. The other option is a smart option, and that is for the marketing department to propose those programs where they think the organization or the marketing department per se can really succeed. And when the marketing department succeeds, it produces results. When it produces results, it becomes effective. When it is effective, it has its positive impact on the organization, and therefore marketing people or the marketing department from that point of view, they should strive hard to look for those opportunities that can become a platform from where they can become effective. Becoming effective by doing all those things that I just explained. So in other words, what I'm saying is the marketing people are going to have a wonderful opportunity if they get into a program which is part of a competitive environment, and you have a great chance and opportunity to prove yourself by applying your expertise, by applying all the tools and techniques of strategic marketing management, because you happen to be a part of a competitive environment, and you have been trained to tackle that and to manage that, so that you are in a better position to prove your mettle and prove to everybody that you are to be taken very seriously. And if you are a good department, then sky's the limit. Not only that you can have good marketing programs in place for the organization to be effective, you also have the opportunity of joining hands with commercial partners and get into cause marketing, get into cooperative marketing campaigns, which could be not just challenging and interesting, but also very paying. So therefore, I would say that the creating conditions which can land you on a competitive platform is, I would say, a smart strategy for marketing people to create and then follow. And follow, you see, with complete the executional the ability. Execution, I would say, is much more important than creating the strategy itself, and that is something that I explained earlier on as well. Let me give you one example how and where you really can create that the platform which happens to be a competitive one, and which is the one which will provide you with the opportunity to become successful. Take the example of a hospital all over again. I mean, a hospital just cannot survive without becoming very good at marketing. How can a hospital succeed unless it has some important strategic information on the operations for different kinds of patients? And how can you relate that with your marketing objectives and goals unless you really have hands-on knowledge of those the facts and figures? You can carry that out with the help of the marketing research, and it could be, you see, qualitative research, and it could be quantitative research. Without having to get into the details, because we all know what qualitative research is and what quantitative research is all about. You can get into forming focus groups. You can get into developing, you see, those questionnaires whereby you can access, you see, a great the portion of your target market, and then arrive at the certain conclusions and then deductions for formulating your the strategies. Nothing is possible without having the marketing as a very strong base. So what I'm saying is that despite the challenges that marketing people face, we just cannot underestimate the importance of the marketing department. It is it is in the vanguard of the operations, and without it, there is just no way that we really can succeed with flying colors, as they say. In continuation of the hospital thing, just like a marketing person like you can be more successful by carrying out a marketing program in relation to a hospital operational side. A marketing person like you on another program which is all about improving the social character of the youth. They may not be as effective in proving your marketing expertise because it takes years and years in order to execute that kind of a social marketing program. So what I'm saying here is that you have a choice, and if you happen to be on a platform which provides you with that competitive marketing platform, or rather marketing competitive market situation, you are in a better position to prove your expertise than your peer, or rather your colleague or your counterpart who happens to work for a social program. So keep in mind when you are just about to enter the non-profit sector, if you happen to choose that, and I would say it is a budding sector, and we do not really have a great pool of the marketing professionals working for the non-profits in our country, and therefore the potential for the people like you who will get into the market is great. I say this after having visited a few the non-profit organizations working with full vigor in this society, and they happen to be organizations that are making good money, and they're making that good money for their causes to be addressed, making not good money because they want to share profits. No, it's a non-profit, and the fundamental that profit has to remain within the organization. So it is not to worry what's going to happen with the people working for the non-profit the organizations. The potential is really great, and it's only that you and I have to prepare ourselves to enter that gate with full preparedness. Thanks.